In this video, I'm going to show you my scripture recording routine. So let's get started. Okay, it's about time for me to start showing you how I do a recording. I was showing you how to set a lot of things up, but having all those things set up make it so much easier to do a recording. So here I am. I opened up a project here, but I'll just show you how you start a project. You can go to File, and after you set things up, you can come down to Project Templates. And I made a project template called Single Narrator. I have a multi-voice. I have several other ones. I have one for music. And so you can just click on this and open it up. To make a template is real simple, is that you just go in here when you have a template and you save project as a template, and then you just give it a name and it'll show up down here. And if you need to delete one of these, you can go into the folder that these are in and just go ahead and delete it if you have too many, but they don't take up too much space. Another way you can start a project is if you're recording along, and I'm recording the book of John here, and I'm done with the book of John, and I like all the settings that I have with my effects and everything, and I want to transfer those on, you can go up to File, Save Project As, and then you come here, and it's in John, so if I want to make an Acts, then I would go in here and I would make a new folder, and I would call it 45 ACT, and then I would call this down here, and I would go in here, and then I would make this 45 ACT, and then I would save it. But if you do it this way, once you save it, you're going to have to go Control A and delete everything, and then you're going to have to go and delete all your regions and your markers. It's not very difficult to do, but you'll have to do that step. Record button, and I'm going to have them say the chapter. John chapter 4. As I told you, we record all the chapters in one project file. If you are going to do a chapter per project file, you can skip out some of these steps here, but I'm going to show you here we have the book of John, and here I have, zoomed in there really tight, chapter 1. So I have a region for chapter 1, I have a region for chapter 2, I have a region for chapter 3, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we're going to make a region. It doesn't have to be real big, just highlight a section, and I have a shortcut, but you can come down here, insert region from time selection. So I click there and it makes a region, and you'll see that it does it in order. So this is region number 4, and it will auto name the file when we render the audio file. So I take it and I pull it over. I pull this guy to the end here, and then I pull him to here. I turn on the snap so he'll bump into him but not go over him. Boop. And so now when I put my mouse there, I don't know if you can see it, it'll show an arrow both directions. Then the next thing I do is I go ahead and start with my markers. I'll go here and I'll put in a marker for the chapter, and I'll put in a C there. And so I'm ready to start recording. I have the people come in and get behind the microphone. I have them sign the permissions forms, and now we're ready to record. Okay, I have them down here. We're going to start with the chapter. And so I hit the record button, and I'm going to have them say the chapter. John chapter 4. Now, we do have them say John and have the book, because when they're on a device, if they just hear chapter 4, well, there's 27 chapter 4s. This way they specifically know what chapter it's for. It's for the book of John. So we have them say John chapter 4. So and I clean this up, move it over, and then I move it down, and then I take this and go to the very beginning. I can zoom in. I might want to stretch this out a little bit, get a little bit here, because I want this with the beginning of my region. So when it does the ripple editing, so when I come into here, I want it to touch. Now when it does the ripple editing, when I do that, it moves the beginning and end of this one right here. So A lot of times you don't need to do that often, but it's nice to have it. And then if you want to take the 3, if you want to pull it over so it doesn't do 3, and then when you move 3 around, it will only move 3. It's up to you. But then I go out about 2 seconds. But I'm going to go ahead and put in, we're going to have a section head. So I'm going to put in S1. For the section heads, you have to number them. And then I come out 2 seconds. So down here in this little yellow box, you can see that it has the time there, and it's about 2 seconds out. Then I can place my cursor here. And so I have my cursor here, and then I can have them read the section head. Jesus walks on the water. And sometimes we just have them do it that way, or we actually have them say section head. So they'll say in their language, but how do they do it at their church? Here in Papua New Guinea, many times they will say section head. So section head, John walks on the water. Section heads are important here. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to move it over. And it was at the right location. It's going to be 2 seconds out because it was at the very beginning there. And so now we're going to go to verse 1. So I can just go ahead and put my verse 1 marker in there. And some readers really good that you can read the chapter head, give a pause, read the section head, give a pause, then do verse 1. And so it really depends on your readers, how you handle that. But I give about a 2-second break here. And then I start recording. So I can zoom out just a little bit here, move over. And some people will say the verse number after the section head. So they'll say verse 1, but they don't read all the verses. So they go along and they do the recording, and then they get to a verse, and I show you how to add verse markers. And then I can put in a 2 there, and then we have a 2, and you can see it really nice there. And then they make a mistake. And so I was showing you before in my custom actions, I go to here, and then I can just go ahead and hit that, and then they can start recording again. And if they make a mistake, made a mistake there, I have my other shortcut that I showed you, do that, and then they can start recording again. So it goes along, and you just basically plod along, verse after verse. There's verse 3, and we just continue on. Then when they get to a section head, and if you go past this region right here, it doesn't really matter because we're going to pull that out later on. So we come to another section head, and so say that this was, I go out 2 seconds afterwards. 2 seconds is about what I go. And then I'm going to put in here for the section head number 2. So I'm going to put in section head number 2. And then I go out about 2 seconds from here, about to there. Now I put my my cursor, and then I tell them to start recording, and then they go ahead and they start recording the section head. And then when they get done, I can take that, I can clean it up, move it down. I can come back here where we did it. A lot of times when I get to a section, I'll clean it up. So I'll just go ahead and clean it up, move it down, and work my way through. This is say that was nonsense talking or whatever. And I take that and move it down. And now I know my coworker, he does everything, has the effects and everything, and does it on his record track. I do it on a separate track just because I know that everything that's down here is in the proper place and it's been normalized and it's ready to go on. So you can move this over, or you don't have to worry about this. At the very end, we'll move it along. So I can put in the next verse number, and so it's going to be 4. Make sure I come out 2 seconds. Okay, come out 2 seconds. That's too far. Click here. And then I start recording. And you just work your way all the way through the book. Now, multi-voice is different, and that will be a different video that I'll be handling. So at the end of the chapter, I let 2 seconds. And I just count it in my head. And so here, and then at the very end, okay, that was me talking. Don't want that. At the very end here, I just put another marker and I call it end. And I explained why I did that in the marker video, but it doesn't hurt anything and it helps. So now we have this, and then I take the region and I go to the very end and I make sure that it's touching here because if it's out here, okay, the ripple edit will work, but I just like having it touch, just preference. And so that's basically how you do the recording. You have it, and that's a very short chapter 4. And so that's kind of the procedure I have. When I get done recording a chapter, then the next thing I do is I'm going to proof the markers. Make sure I put in all the markers that I needed to put in. So you can right click here and it says renumber in time order. It's Control N, I know that, so I just do the shortcut. But what that does is it puts it in order. For some reason, say that you're going along and as you're recording, you put in number 3, you missed 2 and you weren't quite sure where it was. Then you add verse number 3, and then when you came to a stop, you go, okay, I'm going to find where verse 2 is. Well, sequentially on here in Reaper, it's going to make it, instead of number 130, it will make it, 129. It will be a different order, but then when you go on here, it will put it in the order of the timeline. And then the thing I do, and it's really hard here, so I'll do it for chapter 3. I look for the end, and it's typically the very end down here. And then I just count them backwards, 36, 5, 4, 3. And then when I come to section heads, if there is a section head, okay, let's go to 2, see if there's any section heads. No. Oh, here in chapter 1. So I go to here, 51, and I count backwards, and then I get to a section head and say, okay, and I put 5 fingers up. So it helps me remember. Then I go 42, and I keep on counting all the way down. And then all of a sudden I go, okay, here is a 4. And so then I have 4 fingers up, then I counting backwards, there's 3, okay. And then I can go along, and then number 1, and then chapter. So as you notice, as you click on these, they'll jump to those locations. And that's really helpful in multi-voice and for video voice-over dubbing. Now it's time to proof the chapter, to listen back to it. And we like to do it right after because the person's voice is most likely similar. Sometimes it's amazing that one person will read at one time, come back after lunch, and they almost sound like a different person sometimes. And so we like to do the proofing right away so that their voice will sound similar. So if we insert any corrections, we'll do that. So I go to the beginning, I can double click and I can find my region here. I can come to the beginning and then we start proofing. But the thing I do, and it's going to be a little bit hard here, a lot of times I have another monitor with me. I bring up this here, and what I end up doing is, first of all, and I probably did it on a different chapter, but I find an area and I make sure my reefer that this is set how I want. And then the noise gate, I'll look at this as we go along to make sure it's taking out breaths, but not the beginning. And I always say, make sure it's not clipping the beginning of the words or removing the end of the words. You need to make sure that you're not doing that. You can, if you're over aggressive with your noise gate, you can do that. EQing, I'm listening for that. Sometimes I do that in the evening when it might be quieter. Then I'm going to look at my compression to see how that is, and then my limiter, and then I want to look at my peaks, how it's coming along. So take this, and I'm going to go, and I start playing along, and I go to the beginning. I need to go to the beginning of the chapter. Okay, right here, beginning of the chapter. It's hard without 2 monitors. So I go along. I do have the volume pulled down on the master, so I have the here. I have this so it doesn't hurt your ears. And I'm looking at the compression, and I typically like it to go about 6. And so I might bring it down a little bit to get a little bit more compression out of her. Oh, that's too much. That was a nice strong word there. And I'm listening for big noises that I don't like. And then I'm going to look at the limiter. And I typically look at this a lot. I might jump over here and see what it's about 18. I might want a little bit more. So I'm going to take it. And it's not really, I want it to limit it a little bit. So I'll take this and I'll pull it down a little bit and limit it a little bit. And if they say, oh, we have a mistake, if you hit the space bar, it jumped all the way back to the beginning. But I have it's just the action. I have a shortcut for it that when I'm here, if I hit the control space bar, it stops the head right here. So it's really nice to be able to do that, because then they'll say, oh, there's a mistake. And then you go, I wasn't following where you're reading. I'm looking at this stuff right here. And I'm all the way back at the beginning of the file. And they'll say, oh, verse 4. So that's where it's nice to have these markers. But as it's going along, you take it and just hit the control shift and control space bar. And then that will stop where it needs. So you'll know it's verse 3 or 4 typically where the mistake is. And you say, okay, where is it? Verse 3. Okay, it's the last sentence of verse 3. And then we come in here. So then when they say there's a mistake and they want to redo this last little part here, I split it and I take it and shove it off to the side. And I typically close this and then I shove it off to the sides, maybe zoom out. And then I have plenty of room to work for them to do the recording. So I line it up here at the end and then I tell them to start recording, and they start recording, and they make a mistake. No, that wasn't correct. This is just a hard thing to say, so I have my shortcut, and we do it again. And they record it along, and they like what they just did there. So we take it, and I clean it up. Then I can remove the mistake. And I want to make sure that this verse marker is on here. It just helps with the ripple editing. And yes, this is kind of messed up. But and then they can listen back. I typically start at the beginning of the verse to make sure that you started at the right location. A lot of times there's things that are repeated. They're over and over again. And when you're not paying attention to the script and all that stuff, you'll go, oh, and you might hear this phrase and you think it's that, but it's not the wrong phrase. This phrase might be exactly the same 3 words here. And so I go back to make sure that it's correct. I say, okay, starting at the beginning, verse 3, and they go along. And as they're listening through again, I'm listening here, I'm looking at it. Okay. Now it's too much. Okay, it's a little too hot. So now I can come back to the limiter and bring it back a little bit. Double click on here. Okay, we're getting in a better range, and we're going to get some words that are strong that will bring up the average. And so you can mess around with this and try to get it, dialed into how you like it, bring it down just a touch, more, and that might be a little too much. But listen, don't only use your eyes when you're doing this. Listen to it. Listen to it on different speakers, and you get it how you want it. I have been mentioning ripple editing, but I haven't really explained what it is. Ripple editing is this key up here, this button, or it's Control P for me. When you do ripple editing, when you grab something, it will move the markers and everything to the right with it. This is very helpful when you're doing editing or whatever, because you don't want to mess it up. If I turn the ripple editing off, click it up here, and then I move the audio, now all your verse markers are out of sync. And so you don't want to do that. It will just really, really mess you up. So you want to have it turned on up here, and then everything to the right. So everything here, everything to the right. So when you're doing your editing and you go in here and you slice it, or either when you're recording and you slice it and you move it, everything will go over and all your verse markers will be in the right location. So there's times that you do want the ripple editing off. If you recorded something up above, I pull this over, I record something here, and for some reason it goes over the top of this here. Say that it was, see if I take it, ripple edit, but if I take it, I have a shortcut key. You can move this around and turn the ripple edit off for that item that you're moving around. So I'll show you that when we get to mouse modifiers, but have your ripple editing on so you do not mess things up. See, this is to the left, and say that that's there, and then, oh, now you want to move this. Now it's moving all this stuff up there, and it's like, no, that's not what I want. And so I can take this and I can move it wherever I want, and it doesn't affect the other things. So that's really important to have the ripple editing on when you're doing this. Now, when you're doing video dubbings, you'll want the ripple editor off. So once you get done with chapter 3, you have it all lined up, you listen to it, you like your effects, you like how it sounds, all your gates and your noise cleaning up is all correct and everything. You can take it and you can render out your audio, and then you can export your markers. But I'll make another video showing you how to do that. Please subscribe, like, and share this video, and check out these other videos of mine.